Hello once again, and today we will be discussing poem number 3, A Tiger in the Zoo by Leslie Norris from First Flight. And this poem, first of all, let's talk about the introduction of this poem. This poem actually talks about a tiger who is confined in a zoo. Okay, the author is trying to describe a tiger in the zoo behind the bars, encaged, a tiger which is encaged, and the author is trying to create a contrast of a tiger in the zoo with the tiger in its natural habitat, in the natural surroundings. So he'll be focusing on certain characteristic traits of a tiger who is confined in the zoo, who is behind the bars and caged, and how that tiger should be living in the natural habitat. Let's start with the poem. So this poem is divided into 5 stanzas, and each stanza consists of 4 verses, or you can say 4 lines, right? Which is, you can say that this poem is written in the form of a quatrain with the rhyme scheme A B C B. Throughout the poem you will find this rhyme pattern, this rhyme scheme A B C B. That means the the ending words in each stanza, the first verse will have will have 2 words rhyming towards the end of the verses. In each and every stanza, verse number 2 and verse number 4 will rhyme with each other through the last words. Like in stanza 1, cage and rage; in stanza 2, grass and pass; in stanza 3, edge and village; in stanza 5, bars; then in stanza last stanza, cars and stars. Apart from 5th stanza, you will find this rhyme scheme, this rhyme pattern throughout the poem. Now one another device that you will find being used throughout the poem by Norris is personification. So personification is a humanistic trait which is given to an inanimate object or a non-human thing. So a tiger is a non-human being, right? Is not a human being, but the author is referring to the tiger as he, right? So throughout the poem you will find prepositions which are being pronouns which are being used for the tiger as he rather than it. So for animals we use it, but here the author has personified the tiger and used he and his in place of it. Next poetic device that you will find intact throughout the poem is imagery. So throughout the poem you will find very strong imagery. The imagery is when the words are used in the poem in such a manner that it creates a picture in your mind while you read the stanzas. So when you read the stanzas, you will be able to connect and create pictures in your mind, which is a very prominent device in this poem, imagery. Next device which you will find being used throughout the poem is enjambment. So enjambment is a device wherein one verse or one line of the poem moves into the next line without the use of any punctuation mark at the end of the verse or line. For example, he stalks in his vivid stripes the few steps of his cage. So the first line is moving into the next line very smoothly without the use of any punctuation mark at the end. In a similar manner, in stanza 3, you'll again find the use of enjambment. He should be snarling around houses. Now, this line moves smoothly into the second line or second verse at the jungle's edge. So, again, enjambment is used in this particular stanza as well. Then, again, in the last stanza, verse number 3, which says, and stares with his brilliant eyes. So there's no punctuation mark being used towards the end of the verse, which takes you very smoothly into the next stanza. The next device, literary device, which is used by the poet, is a metaphor. So a metaphor here, if you can see stanza 1. Now, what is metaphor? Metaphor is a device wherein a comparison is derived between two different things, and one thing is said to be the other. Right, so in stanza 1, when the author says, on pads of velvet quiet, okay, so the pads of the tiger are being compared with the velvet, the softness of the velvet. So here metaphor is being used by the author. Next poetic device which is used here is consonance. So consonance is basically termed as the repetition of consonantal sounds which are not repeated in a similar pattern, but which can be repeated anywhere in a particular line, in a particular verse, at any place. So you will find throughout the poem, I'll keep telling you, you'll find consonants very strongly used here in this particular poem. For example, he stalks in his vivid stripes. Okay, here the sound of S, stalks and stripes. Okay, so here you will find the use of consonants. Then again assonance. Again assonance is, what do you mean by assonance? Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds in a particular line. So again in line number 1 you'll find he stalks in his vivid stripes, so the sound of I is very prominent here, so it is assonance. Then you'll find the use of oxymoron here. Now oxymoron is a literary device wherein words with two different meanings, opposite meanings, are used together to create maybe to create a certain impression on the readers, or to pass on a certain meaning to the readers. Okay, so oxymoron. So two different adjectives with two different opposing meanings are used together. So here at one place oxymoron is used, which is in stanza 1 verse number 4. In his quiet rage. So quiet and rage are two opposing words. Okay, two opposite words, opposite meanings. So rage is very much as if a violent anger, and quiet is just opposite to violent anger, which is related to silence. And rage is not related to silence, it is related to noise. When someone is violent, when someone shows anger, it creates noise rather than being silent. So both these words are put together, resulting into a very strong use of oxymoron as a device to describe the tiger who is behind the bars in the zoo. Then another device which you will find here used throughout in the poem is alliteration. Alliteration, as you know, is the repetition of consonantal sounds at the beginning of the words in a certain line or in one verse. So alliteration is used at different places here, like in stanza 3 you will find alliteration, in stanza 4 you will find the use of alliteration. Then another device which is used in this poem is onomatopoeia. So onomatopoeia is a device in which sound words are used, the words that are connected with the sounds. So here when you will look at stanza number 3, in stanza 3 it says he should be snarling. So snarling is a word that denotes sound. Okay, so onomatopoeic expression or an onomatopoeic device is very strongly used here in this poem. So all these are the devices, literary devices used by the poet in this poem, that beautifies this poem and helps the poet reach out to the readers in a literary manner with great strength in its words. So let's get started with the meaning of the poem now. So stanza 1 says, he stalks in his vivid stripes the few steps of his cage on pads of velvet quiet in his quiet rage. So in stanza 1 the poet is describing the tiger in the zoo, the tiger who is encaged in the zoo. So while describing the tiger, he states, again see, if you can see in the beginning of the poem I've told you that a literary device personification is used. That means the author personifies the tiger by giving it a humanistic reference. So rather than using it as a pronoun, the author is using the pronoun he. So the author personifies the tiger here by with the use of he. So the author says he stalks in his vivid stripes. So stalks means follows. So he's saying that he the tiger. So the tiger follows. It can be following any person. Okay, maybe the visitors in the zoo. Okay, of any person of any age, any caste or creed. So he's saying that the tiger which is behind the bars, which is encaged in the zoo, he follows in his vivid stripes. So vivid is something of very bright, deep, very vibrant, bright colors. Okay, and stripes, on the tiger's body there are stripes. Okay, very bright orangish, yellowish and black in color. So the combination of these three colors are used by nature to give the skin to the tiger. So the author is describing the bright colors of the tiger's skin and saying that the tiger follows in his vivid, very bright colored stripes. The tiger follows. Now how he is following? The few steps of his cage. So the tiger, as the tiger is confined in a cage, so the tiger is not able to move beyond the cage. So the tiger follows any person with his bright colors, with his vibrant colors, just a few steps inside the cage. So he is able to follow the people only a few steps in his cage and not beyond that cage, on pads of velvet quiet. So the author here is comparing his pads, matlab पंजे, tiger के पंजे. So he is describing the pads of the tiger and comparing it with velvet. So velvet is a material which is very soft in nature, very soft, मखमली होता है, बहुत सॉफ्ट होता है, राइट. सो द ऑथर इज़ trying to create a comparison between the pads of, that means टाइगर के पंजों का कंपैरिजन करा जा रहा है. वेलवेट एक कपड़ा होता है, एक मटीरियल होता है, उससे. सो ही सेइंग दैट ही फॉलोज he follows with his vivid stripes inside the cage just by walking few steps here and there on his pads, which are very soft as velvet. And how he is moving, how he is following very quietly. He is not creating his pads are so velvety that it is while he follows, it is not creating any sound, any noise in his quiet rage. And how he's following in his quiet rage. So rage is extreme anger. So here the author is describing the tiger through his natural characteristic, by stating that the tiger is an animal with violent anger. Rage क्या होता है? Violent, uncontrollable anger. Okay, so he's saying that as the tiger is very violent by nature and carries uncontrollable anger, but as this tiger is encaged, is behind the bars in the zoo, so वो अपनी anger नहीं दिखा सकता. This is why the author here is comparing the tiger's rage with the use of oxymoron. Okay, that means he is using the two adjectives to describe this characteristic wildness of the tiger through oxymoron, through the use of two opposite words with two opposite meanings in his quiet rage. So as the tiger is very violent, carries extreme anger, but he is not able to show that anger when he is inside the zoo. This is why the author has used this word rage with the word quiet. So he is moving, he is following in his very vivid stripes. He follows somebody, maybe the visitor or the people, just few steps inside the cage. Okay, on his velvety paws, on his velvety pads, very quietly. Okay, he is following without creating any noise. Next stanza, he should be lurking. So in again first stanza mein a tiger behind the bars in the zoo is being described. Now in the second stanza the author talks about he moves in, he is talking about how the tiger should be living. He is not supposed to live in the zoo behind the cage, okay, confined to the cage, but where should he be living and how he should be living? Now the author will be describing. He should be lurking in shadow. So what do you mean by lurking? Lurking is remaining hidden, okay, waiting in ambush. Now ambush is fight. ओके, सो जब कोई टाइगर अपने नेचुरल हैबिटेट में होता है, सो वो शिकार करने के लिए जिस तरह से मूव करता है, एक्ट करता है, उस चीज़ को लाइक थ्रू द वर्ड लर्किंग द ऑथर इज़ डिस्क्राइबिंग. ही शुड बी लर्किंग इन शैडो. सो टाइगर को क्या करना चाहिए इन प्लेस ऑफ कन्फाइंड बिहाइंड द बार्स? उसके प्लेस पे टाइगर को कहाँ होना चाहिए? He should be in the jungle, lurking in shadow. That means he should be hiding, okay, in the long grass. He should be hidden behind the grass, waiting for his prey. मतलब उसको लंबी लंबी घास में छुपे हुए होना चाहिए अपने शिकार का, अपने प्रे का वेट करने के लिए, ताकि जब उसका प्रे या उसका शिकार आए तो वो उससे फाइट कर सके और उसको एम्पावर कर ले एंड उसका शिकार कर पाए. ओके, सो ही शुड बी लर्किंग इन शैडो, स्लाइडिंग थ्रू लॉन्ग ग्रास. तो कहाँ पे उसको, किसके शैडो में? ही शुड बी हाइडिंग. कहाँ लर्क करना चाहिए, किसके शैडो में? लॉन्ग ग्रास के, लंबी लंबी ग्रास के शैडो में उसको छुपे हुए होना चाहिए, अपने शिकार की फिराक में, अपने शिकार की तलाश में. ओके, waiting for its prey, sliding through long grass near the water hole. और कहाँ पे छुपे हुए होना चाहिए? जो ग्रास नियर द वाटर होल्स होती है. क्यों वाटर होल्स के पास टाइगर्स शिकार का वेट करते हैं? बिकॉज वहाँ पे डियर्स और वाइल्ड एनिमल्स आते हैं टू ड्रिंक वाटर. सो नियर द वाटर होल, किसी वाटर बॉडी, किसी वाटर पॉन्ड, वाटर होल के पास उसको लंबी घास के पीछे छुपे हुए होना चाहिए अपने शिकार की तलाश में. वेयर प्लम डियर पास. तो सी वाई द ऑथर इज़ टॉकिंग ओनली अबाउट द डियर as a wild animal, as prey of tiger and not any other animal, because tiger का जो favorite prey होता है that is a deer only, or plum deer. प्लम डियर मीन्स बहुत तंदुरुस्त. ओके, हट्टा कट्टा डियर, तंदुरुस्त डियर. ओके, सो जहाँ पर ऐसे पॉन्ड, ऐसे वाटर होल के पास उसे लंबे घास के पीछे छुपे हुए होना चाहिए अपने शिकार, अपने प्रे की इंतज़ार में, वेटिंग फॉर इट्स प्रे. वेयर, जहाँ पे, ऐसा वाटर होल जहाँ पे कौन पास हों, डियर्स, मोटे मोटे डियर्स. ओके, हेल्दी डियर्स पास हों जहाँ से. नाउ अगेन यहाँ पे इमेजरी है. इफ़ यू कैन सी देन द राइम पैटर्न विच इज़ यूज्ड हियर इज़ अगेन ABCD, राइट. यू कैन फाइंड इमेजरी. जब ये वर्ड्स हम पढ़ते हैं तो वी कैन वेरी ईज़िली कनेक्ट बाय क्रिएटिंग पिक्चर्स इन आवर माइंड कि कैसे वो टाइगर लंबे लंबे घासों के पीछे, घास शैडोज़ में अपने प्रे का वेट कर रहा है, राइट. The next is again here you can see enjambment which is used. So verse number 2 moves into verse number 3, and verse number 3 moves very smoothly into verse number 4. So the use of enjambment is again very prominently seen here in this particular stanza. Then alliteration is used here. So alliteration is the repetition of consonantal sounds. So alliteration, where plum deer pass, so the sound of P, the sound of P, where plum P. Alliteration क्या होता है? I've already told you. Alliteration is the repetition of consonantal sounds at the beginning of words, in very closely used words. So plum and pass में the repetition of the sound of P is alliteration. So now we'll move on to our next stanza, which is stanza number 3. So stanza 3 again begins with personification. So the tiger is again, the author continues to personify the tiger with the use of he. So the author says, he should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge, baring his white fangs, his claws, terrorizing the village. So he's saying, the author is saying that instead of again being confined in the cage in the zoo, what the tiger must be doing, the tiger must be moving in the jungle. Okay, और जंगल में कहाँ, he should be snarling. Snarling is creating sound, बहुत तेज़ आवाज़. snarl makes very angry sounds. जब टाइगर बहुत angry sounds create करता है, so that is termed as snarling sound of the tiger. Okay, and normally it creates such sounds to terrify people. So the author is saying he should be snarling around houses. तो आपने देखा होगा जंगल के एज, कभी जंगल की जहाँ पे एज ख़त्म होती है, जहाँ से मे बी विलेज या एरिया स्टार्ट होता है, तो वहाँ पे हाउसेस नज़र आते हैं. सो द पोएट इज़ एक्चुअली ट्राइंग टू क्रिएट दैट सीन, दैट इमेजरी, एंड सेइंग दैट टाइगर को कहाँ होना चाहिए. इंस्टेड द टाइगर शुड बी एट द जंगल्स एज, जंगल के एज पे खड़ा होके ही शुड बी क्रिएटिंग snarling sounds. He should be creating very angry sounds, okay, to terrify people. Okay, and वो houses जो उसको नज़र आ रहे होंगे वहाँ से, जंगल की एज से, वहाँ पे उन houses के लोगों को डराने के लिए the tiger should be making such huge sounds, baring his white fangs and his claws. Exposing, baring is exposing, uncovering. So जब वो दहाड़ता है टाइगर, ओके, जब वो ऐसे नॉइजेस क्रिएट करता है इन एंगर, तो उसके जॉज दिखते हैं, उसके वाइट टीथ दिखते हैं, उसके क्लॉज और उसके फैंग्स दिखते हैं. ओके, सो बारिंग इज, दैट मीन्स the author is saying he should be snarling, he should be creating such huge angry sounds uncovering his claws and dangerous teeth, टेरराइजिंग द विलेजेस, और उसका टेरराइजिंग द विलेज, और उसका मकसद क्या होगा, उसका मोटिव क्या होगा बिहाइंड दीज लाउड साउंड्स, एंग्री साउंड्स, स्नॉलिंग साउंड्स, टू टेरिफाई द विलेजर्स. ऑफ कोर्स ये उसका एक नेचुरल पैटर्न है टाइगर का जो डिस्क्राइब करा गया है, एक नेचुरल कैरेक्टरिस्टिक है, बिकॉज इट्स अ वाइल्ड एनिमल. सो अगेन ऑथर इसमें एक टाइगर की नेचुरल कैरेक्टरिस्टिक को, नेचुरल फीचर को स्पेसिफाई कर रहे हैं. सो रादर देन doing this, he should be, rather than being confined to the cage, he should be creating huge angry sounds to terrify the villagers. Now again यहाँ पे आप देखिए the rhyme scheme which is used is edge and village are rhyming with each other. So A, B, C, B is the rhyme pattern. Personification is again used here. He should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge. Enjambment is used in verse number 1. Verse number 1 moves into the next verse very smoothly without any use of punctuation mark. Boring his white fangs, it claws terrorizing the village. Now last sentence में आप देखिए exclamatory mark से ये क्लोज हुआ है with the punctuation mark which is used as exclamatory mark, okay, because when someone is in terror, okay, तो एक sudden feeling generate होती है of terror. So to give the impression of this sudden feeling of terror, exclamatory mark का use करा है after this sentence. Now let's move on to the next stanza. So next stanza says, but again उसने क्या करा है पोइट ने, the poet started the poem from the zoo, moved on to the jungle, okay, in 2 stanzas in between, right, then at the edge of the jungle, then again he is getting back to the zoo. But लेकिन हो क्या रहा है, वो उस नेचुरल हैबिटेट में नहीं है टाइगर, वो कहाँ है, बट ही इज़ लॉक्ड इन अ कॉन्क्रीट सेल, his strength behind bars, stalking the length of his cage, ignoring visitors. So here he is saying, the author is saying, लेकिन क्या है, वो नेचुरल हैबिटेट में नहीं है, इसीलिए इस वर्स को बट से, स्टैंजा को बट से स्टार्ट कर रहा है. बट कहाँ है टाइगर, ही इज़ लॉक्ड, वो लॉक्ड है इन कॉन्क्रीट सेल. नाउ कॉन्क्रीट आपको पता है, कॉन्क्रीट जो बिल्डिंग्स बनाने के लिए यूज़ होता है, मिक्सचर ऑफ सैंड, सीमेंट, वाटर, ओके, जब वो सॉलिडिफाई हो जाता है तो इट लुक्स, इट रिजेंबल्स अ स्टोन, इतना स्ट्रॉन्ग हो जाता है. सो to talk about and to specify the strength of the cell, the author has used this word concrete. But he is locked in a concrete cell. लेकिन वो कहाँ locked है टाइगर, concrete cell में, concrete bars में, concrete cell में locked है in the zoo. His strength behind bars, और जिस तरह से वो खुद फिज़िकली कॉन्क्रीट सेल में बंद है तो उसकी स्ट्रेंथ भी एक तरह से इज़ लॉक्ड इन द सेल, इज़ बिहाइंड द बार्स. वो अपनी स्ट्रेंथ शो नहीं कर सकता है क्योंकि वहाँ उसकी स्ट्रेंथ से कोई नहीं डरेगा. नो वन विल बी अफ्रेड, नो वन विल बी टेरिफाइड ऑफ हिज स्ट्रेंथ, right? So his strength is also specified as and described as to be locked behind the bars. Stalking the length of his cage, ignoring visitors. Stalking, that means he's stalking, he's moving, he's following from from one direction to the other, taking few steps here and taking few steps there. So he is stalking the length of his cage. So जो cage की जितनी भी लिमिट है बस उसमें वो इधर उधर मूव कर रहा है. इग्नोरिंग विजिटर्स, एंड एट द सेम टाइम ही इज़ इग्नोरिंग विजिटर्स. वो विजिटर्स को क्यों इग्नोर कर रहा है, बिकॉज ऑफकोर्स उसकी नेचुरल खासियत होती है, नेचुरल कैरेक्टरिस्टिक ट्रेड होता है कि वो डराना चाहता है, ओके, वॉन्ट्स टू टेरिफाई पीपल. बट यहाँ पे क्योंकि वो एनकेज्ड है तो लोग, पीपल विल नॉट गेट टेरिफाइड by even his natural characteristic trait. सो इसीलिए वो विजिटर्स को इग्नोर कर रहा है, इज़ नॉट इवन लुकिंग एट द विजिटर्स, क्योंकि वो अपनी नेचुरल स्ट्रेंथ को शो नहीं कर सकता. इट कैन नॉट पोर्ट्रे द नेचुरल स्ट्रेंथ टू द visitors. This is why he is trying to ignore the visitors rather than showing them its real colors and its real strength. Now now इस स्टैंजा में आप देखेंगे द नॉर्मल राइम पैटर्न इज़ नॉट यूज्ड. सेल इज़ डिफरेंट. सो ए बार्स, बी केज, सी एंड विजिटर्स डी. सो ए बी सी डी है. सो यूजुअल राइम पैटर्न इसमें अवॉइड करा है ऑथर ने. इज़ नॉट यूज्ड द normal rhyme pattern which is used in the other stanzas of the poem. So now let's move on again. आपने देखा होगा personification है. टाइगर को यहाँ भी personify करा जा रहा है. imagery create हो रही है. very strong imagery is being created. Right. So now let's move on to the last stanza of the poem. So the last stanza, the author says, he hears the last voice at night, the patrolling cars, and stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. So उसके like टाइगर का नाइट टाइम कैसा होता है ये डिस्क्राइब करा है. Okay, now natural habitat में तो what the tiger does is the tiger preys, वो किल करता है एनिमल्स को, राइट, शिकार करता है एंड फिर वो अपने खा पी के फूड एंजॉय करके सो जाता है. बट यहाँ पे ज़ू में उसकी नाइट लाइफ कैसी है? ओके, सो ही हियर्स द लास्ट वॉइस एट नाइट. तो उसकी लास्ट वॉइस वो क्या सुनता है टाइगर in the zoo? It's of the patrolling cars. Now what are patrolling cars? Patrolling cars are the police cars basically, because of the security concerns they keep taking rounds of any certain specified area. So the tiger hears the last voice of the patrolling cars, the cars which are patrolling, which are taking rounds because of the security, to maintain security in that area. So here he hears those sounds and stares with his brilliant eyes, and he is staring. Stare करना means continuously किसी एक चीज़ को देखते रहना. So he stares with his brilliant, और उसकी आइज़ को भी किस चीज़ से रेफ़र करा जा रहा है? It's being referred as brilliant. तो अपनी brilliant eyes से he looks at the brilliant stars in the sky, right, and maybe he goes to sleep, which we can just assume because the author has not closed this stanza thoroughly. So टाइगर की नाइट एनकेज्ड होकर कैसे रहती है? he hears the patrolling cars sound and he stares at the brilliant stars with his brilliant eyes, and his day gets over. Right, so last stanza में again personification is being used. The rhyme pattern which is used here is, now यहाँ last stanza में there is one more thing which you can feel, which you can sense here, is the author is trying to describe the and end the poem with the sadness of the tiger, the sorrow, the sadness of the tiger. सो उसकी जो एक बहुत साइलेंस है इस लास्ट स्टैंजा में. सिर्फ पेट्रोलिंग कार्स का साउंड है, राइट. अगेन जो पेट्रोलिंग हैं फाइंड को पोर्ट्रे करती हैं ऑफ द टाइगर. तो टाइगर बंद है, एनकेज्ड है, वो कुछ नहीं कर सकता है, राइट. और एक सैड फीलिंग के साथ दिस पोम इज़ बीइंग क्लोज्ड बाय लेस्ली नॉरिस. Is closing this poem with a very sad voice, with a very sad tone, with the sadness and the sorrowful feeling of the tiger, because the tiger is behind the bars, the tiger is encaged, the tiger is in the zoo. So यहाँ पे you can see again alliteration is being used. He hears the lost voice at night, the patrolling cars, and stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. Stares with his brilliant, the sound of S Okay, stirs, eyes. Okay, the sound of s um, gives us a certain rhythmic texture to the poem. So this is all about the poem. So the transitions which are used in the poem are continuous. The poet starts with the setting of the zoo in the first stanza. Then in the second stanza, he takes us to the jungle where the tiger is waiting for its prey, and then again moves to the edge of the jungle where the tiger is trying to terrify the villagers. And then again we can see a transition from the jungle to the back to the zoo. So this poem has three levels of transitions. Transition means एक पर्टिकुलर सेटिंग से दूसरी सेटिंग पे मूव करना. ओके, सो द सेटिंग इज़ कंटिन्यूसली चेंजिंग. ओके, सो 3 टाइम्स चेंज करी है इसकी सेटिंग, ज़ू से जंगल में, जंगल से अगेन ज़ू में. Right, so I hope this poem is clear to you. If you have any doubts or if you want to ask me anything, you can write to me in the comment section. Drop a comment whether you are liking my description, my explanation of the poems, and I'll be motivated by your comments. uh, for more such lessons in English, grade 10th, do subscribe to my channel, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get continuous notifications of my videos. Thank you so much for listening to me. Once again, all the best. We'll soon meet again with another poem, another explanation of the next poem from grade 10th, and soon I will also start with the descriptive lessons from English. Thank you so much.